All right, welcome back. We have a new section here on a new topic we haven't seen yet called React Router. So there's actually going to be two sections. This is the intro to React Router, and then afterwards we'll have a section on advanced React Router patterns. And along the way, there'll be a bunch of exercises. So first, there's a couple goals. We want to talk about client-side routing in general, what it is, why you should care, why it's useful. And we'll compare client-side to server-side routing, talk about similarities, differences, but most of what we'll be doing after this initial video is actually implementing our own client-side routing using React Router. So let's start with an overview of routing. So the term routing used to only refer to server-side routing. Now there's also client-side routing. So let's start by focusing on server-side routing. This is the traditional version of routing. So normally you request a web page, the server on the back end. Let's say I'm requesting IMDb for some movie. For example, this movie, Amadeus, one of my favorite movies, great one. If you look at the URL, I send this request, I hit enter. It goes, sends that request off to the IMDb server. It sees the URL and, oh, I guess I can't zoom in on that. There's an ID in here, well, /title/TT008, blah, blah, blah. And that server is going to then figure out what page to send back based off of that information in the URL. It takes that ID, it looks up, information in the database on that movie, and then it fills in HTML and sends it back to me. And then if I click on some other movie, another great one, American Beauty, this time the ID is different, and so it sends me different content. But of course, my page is refreshing when I click, just to make sure, watch right there. This is happening on the server side of things. I get different content when I click on different links. I am loading an entirely new web page. So that is server-side routing. That's how every website used to work. Now we have client-side routing where we can basically fake that. We can display different information to the user based off of the URL, even if they never leave the page never refreshes, we can still show things selectively. We can have users click buttons or links to load new content. Basically, I like to think of it as like a big musical production or a play where there are sets and people are moving these sets in and out. The stage is never moving most of the time. You see the exact same stage, but you see different backgrounds, you see different content, because people are moving sets in and out. Sort of the same idea, where we're not actually going to leave the page, but we'll see different content. And with what we know right now, we can do this on our own. It's not the most elegant solution, but for the rest of this video, I'm going to show you a sort of hacked together version of client-side routing. So I have a very simple demo where I have 3 components I've made, 3 different views or different web pages if this was a traditional app using server-side routing. So I have an about page, a contact page, or a contact component, and a dog component. They don't do anything. They simply display a title, and in the case of dog, an image. For about, it displays an H1 that says about, and a paragraph that says this is the about page, and then for the contact, it just says please don't contact us ever. So imagine that I wanted to have a nav bar at the top where I could click to view the content on the contact component. I could click the dog link and see the dog component, so I could navigate around. Right now, I'm simply rendering all 3 components, 1 instance of each, in the app, and I see them all at the same time. Yes, it's not styled, it's not pretty, but imagine I had a nav bar up here and I could navigate to different pieces. Using what we know, we can make that sort of work. So let me show you. We could put a nav up top and put some anchor tags in there. And the first one will go to about. And what we're going to do is have it call a method when you click on it. Let's have this method, well, we need to define a method first. Let's call it change page. And we'll pass in some new page, which will be a string. And what we're going to do is keep a piece of the state that will decide which component to render. And then you click on a link, we will update that piece of state to then change what we see down here. So it's a bit scattered, I apologize. We need a constructor. And let's begin by setting the initial state, this.state equals, and we'll have a page, which will be a string, and let's have the default be about. So when the page loads the first time, we want to see the about page, or the about component. So we're going to add 3 links, and each one is going to call change page and pass in a different string. So the first one, I'm just going to do it inline here because we need to pass an argument, will be this dot change page of about, and then I'm going to duplicate this. The next one will be for dog, and then the text will say dog, and then the next one will be contact. So right now they won't do anything. They will call this method up here, change page, and we're going to call this dot set state page is now the page that was passed in. So let's call this new page, and then new page here. Okay, so we now have a way of changing the state, but we're not actually using that state to render something. So let's make another method. What we could do is just a conditional down here and say if this dot state dot page equals about, render this about component. I'm going to make a method, so I'm going to actually delete this entire thing and add a method in here called render page. And then up here, render page will simply return the correct component depending on what this dot state dot page is. So we'll say if this dot state dot page is equal to about, we will return the about component. And I'll duplicate this. We'll do else if it is equal to dog, we'll return the dog component. And if it's equal to contact, we will return the contact component. So over here, you can see it's sort of working. Our nav bar is quite hideous. We'll have to fix that with some styling, but it's over here on the side. We have our about page showing up before we had all 3 components. Now we just have that one because the initial state is about. And now if I click on dog, for example, we're seeing the dog component. Click on contact, I see the contact component. So it's working, but this isn't a great experience for a couple of reasons. One is that the forwards and backwards buttons don't work. There's not really a history of where we've been. And the browser has no idea. The browser window itself, the history object, doesn't know that we've changed anything because we're just showing and hiding content based off of clicks. So this is where the React router comes in. There is a better way of doing this. This is not how we'll be doing routing, but I wanted to show you that we can achieve some degree of routing where we're just updating something in the state, and that is going to determine what is actually rendered. The about component, the dog component, the contact. So let me quickly style this. Okay, quickly styled it. Now our links look a little bit more like a nav bar, and I can click on one and I see new content. Still works exactly the same. So again, this works for this purpose, but there's a lot more to client-side routing, a lot more features that we don't really have access to with this setup. Also, React doesn't like when we do this. Got quite a few errors here because we're continually re-rendering things, but you can see right here, the href attribute is required for an anchor to be keyboard accessible. So we're using these anchor tags back here, but they don't have an href. And if I did give them an href, like just an empty string, for example, on that first one, when I click it, it reloads the entire page. So we don't want to do that. And we can override that behavior, but it requires some JavaScript and some work. Instead, we're going to use React Router, which takes care of all of this, and it also solves some other problems. So to summarize our attempt at faking client-side routing, it's okay. It does let us show different pages, different components when you click on something, and it's all on the front end, page never reloaded. But what we don't get URLs when we move around the pages. The URL is staying the same no matter which route or whichever link I'm clicking. In addition, we can't go forward and backwards. If I tried to, like let's go to contact. Now if I want to go back to dog, if I hit back, it just refreshes the page. And we don't have a way to bookmark pages on this site. If our URL is always localhost 3000 or whatever, wherever it's served, colt.com, if we have multiple pieces we're showing, multiple views, our homepage, our about page, the sign up page, all this stuff, if you wanted to bookmark one of them, they're all treated the same because it's the same URL. So this is where real client-side routing comes in and where we're going to use React Router.